This is the On Cloud Stratus. And on my first run in the shoe, I found it a bit confusing, but nevertheless with glimmers of hope. But now that I've run in this shoe for a few months, has it lived up to its potential? It's time to go for a run and talk about the Cloud Stratus after 100 miles. .13 miles, 9 minutes, 27 seconds per mile, 138 beats per minute today, going for a nice and easy run along the lakefront here in Chicago and taking the On Cloud Stratus to the 100 mile mark. Now, before I give my thoughts on this shoe and how it's held up and changed over the last 100 miles, I do want to go over some disclosures. This is a pair of shoes that On sent me for the purpose of review. However, they're not paying me to make this video or to use the shoe, and they're not going to get a chance to preview any of my footage or my thoughts before you guys get a chance to see this video on YouTube. So with that disclosure out of the way, let's talk about the On Cloud Stratus after 100 miles. So first, let's talk about how I've been using the shoe over the last 100 miles, and then I'll talk about how the shoe has changed or how my opinions have changed over that amount of time. First, let's talk about how I've been using it. Now, it looks like a max cushion shoe. It's got a ton of stack height, and the language that On uses in its marketing for the shoe talks about it as a max cushion shoe. But I just don't like it as a max cushion shoe. I don't like it as a recovery shoe at all. Overall, I find that the Helion foam and the Cloud Tech design that they're using for this foam, I think is just a bit too firm for my preferences in terms of what I want from a max cushion shoe. That's not to say that I don't like the shoe. I do like the shoe, but I like it as kind of like an easy run shoe, a shoe that I want for my regular runs, but not necessarily my recovery runs and not necessarily my workouts. So like an ideal day would be if I'm just going out for like a medium length run or even a long run that's just going to be at a very easy aerobic pace. That's where I feel like this shoe works really well for me because I feel like the shoe really rolls well. And there's a couple of things that make it roll really well, and I think part of that is the overall geometry of the shoe. It does have a little bit of a curl up at the toes to help it kind of roll through that foot strike and gait cycle, but it also has this channel that's going through the center of the shoe along with the speed board that's underneath here. It's this hard piece of polypropylene. You can kind of see it. It used to be pretty much white. Now it's a little bit discolored, but it's a hard piece of material that acts kind of like you would think that a carbon fiber plate is, acting in a super shoe, but it's a different material and hence a different rigidity. It's more thick than like say a rock plate, but not as rigid as a carbon fiber plate. For me, when I'm running at much slower paces and like recovery paces, I find my foot strike kinds to get a little bit more sloppy, especially because on those days I'm usually a little bit more fatigued. And that's where the shoe tends to disagree with me a little bit more because I think that it really wants to funnel your momentum in a very straight way. And if you're not landing like very straight, then it kind of like gets to be a little bit of a battle. It argues with you just a little bit. So I like it on those medium length runs and those long runs because those are days where I'm running kind of at my normal kind of foot strike and a little bit faster than on my recovery days. And I feel like then the shoe and I are in much better harmony together. And so it makes for a much better running experience. And a lot of times, if you can get into that flow with the shoe, it makes for a really pleasant sensation and it just feels like everything's working really well. Those sensations don't happen to me very frequently though, like they're kind of like too short-lived and they're too few and far between for it to make it like my favorite medium run or long run shoe. But there are really nice moments where the shoe and I are really getting along and I just feel like I'm rolling down the road and it's very pleasant. And ultimately, I think that the person that I would recommend this for is someone that is a higher mileage runner, someone who's training for a marathon or maybe has trained for many marathons before and is doing high mileage weeks and just wants something that's going to be really comfortable to absorb a lot of the regular runs that you're running multiple times per week. So now let's talk about how the shoes changed over the last 100 miles and if there's any opinions of mine that have changed since the first run video that I made. I think it was back in August of last year. And I'd say there's a lot of stuff that pretty much hasn't changed. I still think that the shoe looks absolutely fantastic. I love the Swiss engineering of On. I love the design. I love the color work that they've done on this shoe as well. One thing that has changed though is that it doesn't look quite as nice as it used to. After all, it's a white shoe, and a white shoe after kind of the slushy, messy part of a Chicago winter just isn't going to hold up. So as far as like cosmetically, I don't think it's holding up all that well, at least compared to how fantastic I thought the shoe looked right when I first got it out of the box. And I think that if I'd been a little bit more careful with it in terms of like the conditions under which that I was running in the shoe, maybe it would have held up a little bit better. Maybe I beat it up a little bit on purpose just to really test the shoe out. But I do think that it's kind of like, you know, discoloring a little bit here and there. But overall, in the grand scheme of things, it just means that the shoe's been loved and running, and that's always going to be a really good look on any shoe. As far as the mesh goes, it's still very breathable and it's still very comfortable. I was a little bit concerned over time that some of these mesh holes over on the side of the foot look like they're getting a little bit bigger, but everything's still holding together. I haven't had any parts of these that are fraying or tearing, and I'm actually not sure if they're any bigger or maybe just the discoloration, the color change is making kind of like the mesh look a little bit different in my mind. But overall, everything's still held together really well. I'm not seeing any damage to any of the materials in the upper, and it's all still very comfortable. The lightly padded tongue, I think, is a really nice amount of padding, not so much that it feels like a puffy piece of memory foam on there that gets my foot hot, and not so little that people who get a little bit of sensitivity when they're really cranking down on the laces are going to complain that there's not enough protection. So I feel like it's a bit of a Goldilocks of the tongue that's in this shoe. There is a little bit more padding as you go back towards the back part of the shoe as well, and I feel like that's all really nice for those times when you're spending a little bit more time than kind of your short easy run. If you're getting into that medium length or that longer run length, I think this is going to be a nice amount of padding to have back here. As far as the structure that's on this exterior heel cup, I think that there's a lot going on in here, and I personally don't like to have a lot of stuff in the back of the shoe, but I know that a lot of you guys do. So I feel like if you're looking for a little bit more support, something to keep everything from getting too squirrely in the heel, I think that this is a really nice way that they put it together. I do wish that it were a little bit lighter and could kind of get out of my way a little bit more, but overall, I feel like the way that the shoe is put together on the upper, everything's holding up really well and it's working really well. The only thing I can say about it is that the shoe got dirty. So that's a good plus overall if you think about it. As far as the midsole goes, I do think that this is still a pretty firm shoe, and that's precisely why I don't really like it for those recovery days or those days where I'm really looking for a max cushion shoe, because it doesn't feel like a max cushion shoe to me. I'm personally not a huge fan of the cloud kind of design that they have in these shoes. I really would love to see On make some running shoes, not just the Roger Federer shoes, but like running shoes with either this same foam or a different foam without the clouds in it. I think that would be great. Or perhaps a shoe maybe with clouds but without the speed board. Just, I think there's a lot going on in here, and I think that it prohibits and prevents the shoe from becoming a real max cushion shoe that I think that On wants the Cloud Stratus to be. The other thing that I think that could be going on is that there could be some regional preferences going on. Now, the Swiss engineering is not only something that you just see in the marketing materials, but it's in the design language, and I think also perhaps in the construction of the midsole in terms of what exactly they're looking for. And I think that what in the European sense might be considered max cushion could be very different than what's considered max cushion in the American or North American sense. And so I think that could be a little bit where I'm getting a disconnect in what this shoe is marketing itself as versus what I'm experiencing in the shoe. But in either event, I do think it's a bit firm. Now, some of you in the comments have been telling me that, you know, just wait, let's let the shoe break in a little bit, give it a couple more miles, and it should loosen up a little bit. And I think that it's loosened up a little bit. I think that you can see, if you look really closely at it, that some of the clouds toward the forefoot are looking a little bit compressed compared to what they look like fresh out of the box. And to the extent that I feel like the foam overall, or the foam system, if you're thinking about the foam plus the clouds, is a little bit of a softer ride than it was right out of the box. But I think that, you know, the Speedboard in here, I think, is kind of like insulating your foot from kind of what's going on with the clouds. Now, I think part of the reason why they have the Speedboard is so that way the shoe doesn't get too kind of like wobbly as it compresses all over the place. So it may be something that they need to have, but I feel like in the total equation of the shoe, it's a bit on the firm side, and I'd love to see it get softened up for something that's called like Cloud Stratus. That's supposed to be big and puffy and fluffy and invoking all of that kind of imagery. But on the other hand, I think one way that the shoe is very well suited for longer runs, and some of the use cases that a max cushion shoe might be really good for, is that there is plenty of room in this toe box. And now when I think of like Swiss engineering or things that are more of like a European fit and finish, I think of things as being very snug and not having a lot of room. Yet in this shoe, I feel like the upper provides plenty of room. So much so that I was able to run with waterproof socks in these shoes, and I still felt good in the shoe. I didn't feel like I was just cramming too much in the shoe at that point, because waterproof socks tend to be a lot thicker than even the thickest kind of like regular running socks that you might have. So as far as the room goes in the shoe, whether I have waterproof socks that are thicker or regular socks, I'm still able to get a good and comfortable fit, and I feel like there's plenty of room in the shoe to make it comfortable for a longer amount of time that you may be in the shoes. Now let's take a look at the wear and tear on the outsole. I think that the outsole rubber is holding up exceptionally well. I'm really impressed with how little signs of wear there actually are on this shoe. They kept it to a minimum, and I think they did a really great job of doing that, helping to keep the shoe lightweight. I measured the shoe when I first got it at 10.4 ounces, or just under 300 grams. And I feel like that's a good amount of weight to have in this kind of shoe, and in terms of the dynamics of it and how it's performing. So I feel like having that lesser amount of rubber was the right choice. And it turns out it didn't need it anyway, because even the rubber that they have in the shoe is still holding up really well, and it's not like it's taking a beating. You're also running on some exposed foam in the Cloud Stratus, and that foam is also holding up really well. So again, I feel like this shoe is going to be able to hold up for a really long time, and you're going to be able to get a lot of durability out of it, both from the upper and from the midsole and outsole. So overall, I would say that the On Cloud Stratus for me was not my favorite shoe that I've run in over the past several months, but I do think that is a positive experience that I've had with the On Running brand, and so I feel like we're moving in the right direction. If you have any questions about the On Cloud Stratus, please feel free to put them in the comments down below, or better yet, stop by the live stream that I do Monday through Friday right here on YouTube. I do it over on my Kofuzi Run Club channel. I'll post a link to that in the description down below. Before I go, I do want to talk about the charity runner of the week. This week, the charity runner is Andy Mikula of Mikula Running. He's going to be running the New York City Marathon and raising money for the ASPCA. You guys all know what the ASPCA does. I was happy to donate $100 of my money to Andy's fundraising efforts, and I hope that you'll consider donating even just the minimum amount to support a fellow runner. That's all I have for today, everybody. Thanks so much for making it all the way to the end of the video. Hopefully you guys are staying safe out there on your runs, and I will see you in the next one.
Yo, what's going on?